April 23, 1940, 05:47 hours. Wilhelmshaven Naval Base, northwest Germany. The telegraph room smells of burnt coffee and machine oil. Obergefreiter Klaus Bergmann sits hunched over his Enigma machine, the grey light of dawn seeping through the salt-stained window behind him. His shift began 11 hours ago, and his eyes burn with exhaustion. The stack of weather reports on his desk seems to multiply with each passing minute. Another U-boat transmission, another coded message, another turn of the rotors. He reaches for the rotor settings, fingers moving on autopilot. The daily key has been distributed. Rotor order 2V3, ring settings 24, 13, 22, plugboard connections specified in the codebook. But for the message key, the three-letter indicator that would encrypt this particular transmission, Bergmann's mind goes blank. Protocol demands randomness. 3 letters, chosen at complete random, typed twice to account for radio transmission errors. His fingers hover over the keyboard. CIL, the initials of his girlfriend, back in Bremen, Christa Ingrid Lang. He has used them before, perhaps yesterday, perhaps the day before that. The letters glow faintly on the lampboard as he types the message key twice, sil. The encoded version, PQJRTM, goes into the message preamble. Bergmann feeds the weather data through the machine, each keystroke producing a seemingly random letter on the lampboard above. He transcribes them mechanically, compiles the transmission, and hands it to the radio operator without a second thought. Across the North Sea, in a requisitioned Victorian mansion surrounded by wooden huts and concertina wire, the radio intercept station at Bletchley Park captures every letter. The transmission joins hundreds of others in the wireless room, where Women's Auxiliary Air Force operators transcribe the cipher groups onto standardized forms. The paper travels through a pneumatic tube system to Hut 6, where it lands on a sorting desk covered in similar intercepts. Nothing about this message appears unusual, just another routine German naval transmission, encrypted with the Enigma machine that German High Command believes to be absolutely unbreakable. But 50 miles away in that telegraph room, Obergefreiter Bergmann makes the same choice again the next morning, and the morning after that. CIL becomes his mental placeholder, the path of least resistance when exhaustion overwhelms procedure. He is not alone. Across German military communications networks, thousands of operators face the same monotonous demand: create randomness hour after hour, shift after shift. And human nature, the persistent flaw in even the most sophisticated system, begins to show cracks in the armor of the German cipher. Bletchley Park awakens, May 12, 1940, 14:20 hours, Hut 8, Bletchley Park, Buckinghamshire, England. The wooden hut vibrates with intellectual energy disguised as chaos. Paper covers every available surface: intercepts, worksheets, frequency analyses, failed attempts at breaking the daily key. Alan Turing stands at a blackboard covered in algebraic notations, his cardigan rumpled, a half-eaten sandwich forgotten on the windowsill. Around the table, the night shift cryptanalysts have left their work. Partially completed cribs, potential message keys, fragments of suspected plaintext matched against ciphertext. Dilly Knox sits at the far end, examining a stack of German naval intercepts through thick reading glasses. His expertise in ancient Greek papyri seems an unlikely qualification for breaking military ciphers, yet his mind works in patterns, seeing connections where others see randomness. He has been staring at message indicators for the past 3 hours. The 6-letter groups that begin each transmission, the enciphered message keys, typed twice by German operators. Turing, Knox says without looking up, his voice cutting through the ambient conversation. Come here. Turing crosses the room in 3 strides, chalk dust still on his fingers. Knox spreads 5 intercepts across the table, each from a different date, all from the same German naval grid square in the North Sea. His pencil taps the indicator groups: PQJRTM, PQMRTN, PQKRTL. Notice anything? Knox asks. Turing studies the sequences. The first three letters of each indicator are nearly identical: PQJ, PQM, PQK. Given that each message key should be completely random, this similarity defies probability. The first half of the indicator, Turing says slowly, is showing a pattern. Not just these 5, Knox replies, pulling out another dozen intercepts from the same station. Look at the dates. Every transmission from this particular operator over a 2-week period. The first 3 letters of the indicator always begin with PQ. The room seems to contract around them. Turing takes the stack, spreading them chronologically. The pattern becomes undeniable. A German operator, somewhere in the coastal waters or naval stations, is not choosing random message keys. He is using the same 3 letters, or nearly the same 3 letters, transmission after transmission. If he's using the same plaintext message key repeatedly, Turing says, his mind already racing through implications, we have a fixed point, a known relationship between plaintext and ciphertext. Knox nods grimly. We've been calling them sillies, from the initials CIL that we suspect some operator keeps using. Probably his girlfriend, his wife, his dog, something he can remember without thinking. Gordon Welchman, head of Hut 6, joins them at the table, drawn by the sudden intensity. How many operators are showing this behavior? He asks. We've identified 17 distinct patterns across different networks over the past month, Knox replies. Some use the same 3 letters every time. Others use sequential patterns, ABC, BCD, CDE. One operator appears to use QWE, the first 3 letters on his keyboard. Turing is already at the blackboard, equations forming rapidly. If we know the plain text message key and we have its enciphered version, we can deduce rotor positions. Not the entire daily key, not the plugboard settings or ring positions, but enough to dramatically narrow the search space. De Welchman picks up an intercept, studying the indicator group. We need to identify which operators are making these mistakes, track their transmission patterns, correlate them with times, frequencies, probable locations. And then, Turing adds, turning from the blackboard, we need to build something that can exploit these sillies fast enough to matter. By the time we manually work through the rotor positions, the daily key has changed, and the intelligence is worthless. Deal. The 3 men look at each other, the weight of possibility settling over them. Somewhere in the German military communications network, exhausted operators are making the same mistake hour after hour, and Bletchley Park has just learned to recognize their handwriting. The Anatomy of Sillies, June 8, 1940. 09:30 hours, Hut 6. Analysis section, Bletchley Park. The intelligence operation evolves into something resembling behavioral psychology. Joan Clarke, one of the few female cryptanalysts permitted into the inner sanctum of code-breaking, maintains what the team calls the Silly Book, a ledger of operator characteristics across German military networks. Each page documents a different transmission station, frequency of operation, time patterns, stylistic quirks in message formatting, and most importantly, any deviation from proper cryptographic discipline. She sits at a desk beneath a window overlooking the manor grounds, 3 months of intercepts spread before her in chronological order. The morning sun illuminates the typescript. Station 17B, believed to be attached to the 2nd U-boat flotilla, operating from Lorient, France. The operator, they've nicknamed him Hermann, has been on duty since March. His silly is breathtakingly consistent. The message key TGF appears in 87% of his transmissions. He's either incredibly stubborn or incredibly stupid, remarks Peter Twin, leaning over her shoulder to examine the data. Twin, a physicist by training, brings a scientist's precision to pattern recognition. Possibly both. Clarke runs her finger down the column of intercepts. Not stupid, Tired. Look at the transmission times. Her man comes on shift at 0400 hours and broadcasts continuously until 1600. 12-hour shifts, day after day. By hour 10, his discipline collapses. Early in the shift, we see more variation. TGF, TGH, TGJ. Late shift, it's TGF almost exclusively. On the opposite wall, a growing chart maps the taxonomy of operator failures. Category 1, repeated initials, operators using personal initials or those of loved ones. Station 9F uses AAA repeatedly, suggesting either remarkable ego or remarkable laziness. Category 2, sequential patterns, operators running through alphabetical progressions rather than selecting random letters. Category 3, keyboard geography, QWE, ASD, YXC, the muscle memory of hands resting on typewriter keys. Category 4, default settings, operators failing to randomize at all, simply using whatever letters the rotors displayed when they loaded the machine. Hugh Alexander, a mathematics lecturer and British chess champion recruited into Hut 8, enters carrying a fresh batch of overnight intercepts. "We've got a new one," he announces, dropping the stack on Clarke's desk. Abwehr network, somewhere in occupied France. The operator appears to be using his girlfriend's name, Rosa, encoded as the message key RSA. "Romantic," Twin comments dryly. "Also catastrophically insecure." Clarke adds the notation to her ledger. That makes 23 confirmed sillies across all networks, 23 human beings, each creating a vulnerability in the German cipher system. But the sillies represent only one category of exploitable patterns. Alexander spreads a different set of intercepts across the table. These are routine weather reports transmitted by U-boats at sea. "Wetterbericht," he says, pointing to the timestamp. "Every morning like clockwork. 0600 hours. Every U-boat on station transmits current meteorological data." Clarke examines the cipher groups. "And we know the format," she says, understanding immediately. "Temperature, atmospheric pressure, wind direction, visibility, sea state." The short weather cipher codebook formats everything into 7 letters, which are then encrypted with Enigma. "Exactly," Alexander confirms. "We know the plain text structure. We know it contains the German word Wetterbericht, or Wetter, in the message header. We know the approximate content. There are only so many ways to describe weather conditions. Even without breaking the daily key, we can make educated guesses about plain text content." Twin picks up the thread. "These aren't sillies. They're cribs. Suspected or known plain text that we can align against the ciphertext. If we position the crib correctly, we create a relationship between input and output letters. And the Enigma," Clarke adds, completing the logic, "never encodes a letter as itself. That's a design feature to prevent plain text leakage, but it becomes a vulnerability. If our crib alignment puts a plain text A against a ciphertext A, we know immediately that the alignment is wrong. We can eliminate impossible positions." Alexander nods, a chess player recognizing the elegance of the trap. "Between operator sillies and message cribs, we're narrowing the search space from 159 quintillion possible keys to something almost manageable." Almost. Clarke closes her ledger, the accumulated evidence of human fallibility bound between cloth covers. "We're not breaking the Enigma machine," she says quietly. "We're breaking the people who use it." The morning sun climbs higher over Bletchley Park, and in the telegraph rooms of the Kriegsmarine, operators continue making the same small mistakes that will ultimately cost their nation the secrecy of its communications. Building the weapon, August 14th, 1940. British Tabulating Machine Company, Letchworth, Hertfordshire. The engineering challenge borders on the impossible. Harold "Doc" Keane, chief engineer at BTM, stands before a prototype that resembles a collision between a telephone switchboard and an industrial loom. 6.5 feet tall, 7 feet long, 2 feet wide, weighing slightly over 1 ton, the machine that will be called the Bombe occupies most of the workshop floor. Turing arrived 3 hours ago with Welchman, carrying blueprints that evolved from Polish designs captured before Warsaw fell. The Polish cryptanalysts, Marian Rejewski, Jerzy Różycki, Henryk Zygalski, had built their own version, the Bombe, which could solve earlier Enigma configurations in about 2 hours. But the Germans added rotors, changed procedures, increased plugboard complexity. The Polish solution became obsolete overnight. 36 rotor sets, Keen explains, gesturing to the rows of copper drums mounted vertically on the machine's face. Each set contains 3 drums corresponding to the 3 rotors in a German Enigma machine. Top drum represents the left rotor, middle represents the center, bottom represents the right. Turing circles the machine, examining the wiring harness that connects each rotor set. "And the diagonal board?" he asks, referring to Welchman's crucial addition to the original Polish design. Welchman steps forward, pointing to a panel on the machine's side studded with cable sockets. "This exploits the reciprocal nature of the Enigma plugboard," he explains. "If A is plugged to F in the German machine, then F must be plugged to A. The diagonal board allows the bomb to test these reciprocal connections simultaneously, multiplying our search efficiency." Keen's engineers have spent 6 weeks translating cryptanalytic theory into mechanical reality. The top drums rotate at approximately 100 revolutions per minute, spinning through rotor positions at a speed no human could match. As each position makes electrical contact, current attempts to complete a circuit through the test registers and diagonal board. Most attempts fail, the circuits remaining incomplete. But when a rotor configuration matches the crib, when the electrical pathways align correctly, the machine stops. "How long for a complete run?" Turing asks. "Depends on the crib length and complexity," Keen replies. "With a good crib and suspected wheel order, we estimate 20 minutes to test all rotor positions. If we don't know the wheel order, we'll need multiple runs." 20 minutes. Compared to the weeks of manual calculation required before, it represents a revolution in cryptanalysis. But Turing is already considering the operational reality. "We'll need more than one machine," he says. "If we're running multiple wheel orders, multiple cribs, testing different hypotheses, one bomb won't be sufficient." "How many?" Keen asks. "Dozens," Welchman says. "Eventually, perhaps hundreds. Every hour of delay means lost intelligence. We need parallel processing, multiple machines running simultaneously." The engineering implications are staggering. Each Bombe requires 6 weeks to construct, using precision components in a nation already stretched thin by wartime production demands. But the alternative, allowing German U-boats to sink supply convoys with impunity, allowing Wehrmacht commanders to coordinate operations in complete secrecy, is unacceptable. By October, the first operational bomb arrives at Bletchley Park. The Women's Royal Naval Service, the WRENS, are trained to operate it. They learn to wire the diagonal board according to the day's crib, set the rotor positions, activate the machine, and transcribe any stops where the electrical circuit completes. Each stop represents a possible solution to the daily Enigma key. The operational protocol becomes standardized. Cryptanalysts in Hut 6 or Hut 8 identify a promising crib, a suspected plaintext matched against intercepted ciphertext. They calculate the electrical pathways, create a menu for the bomb operators. The menu specifies which rotors to use, how to configure the diagonal board, which positions to test. The WRENS translate the menu into physical reality, plugging cables, setting drums. The machine begins its methodical march through possibilities, testing configuration after configuration until it stops, or until the run completes without finding a solution. When a stop occurs, a different WREN tests it on a checking machine, a 3-rotor Enigma replica that verifies whether the proposed solution actually decrypts the message. Most stops are false positives, electrical flukes that don't correspond to the actual German settings. But occasionally, Increasingly, as the cryptanalysts refine their techniques, a stop produces clear German text. The daily key has been broken. Every message transmitted by the German military on that network for that entire day can now be read. The race becomes this: identify sillies and cribs fast enough, set up the bombs fast enough, test enough configurations fast enough that the daily key is broken while it still matters, before midnight, before the Germans distribute a new key, and the process begins again. The hunt for cribs, November 3rd, 1940, 05:30 hours. Hut 8, Bletchley Park. The pre-dawn ritual has become almost ceremonial. Harry Hinsley, a 21-year-old history student turned intelligence analyst, sits surrounded by 3 months of decrypted German naval traffic, searching for predictability in chaos. His task: identify patterns in German communication procedures that can be exploited as cribs for today's Enigma key. On the desk before him, a leather-bound notebook contains what the team calls the crib catalogue, a growing encyclopedia of predictable German military phrases. Page 1. Weather reports. The German word Wetterbericht appears in nearly every morning transmission from U-boats at sea. Hinsley has documented the transmission times, message lengths, even the specific phrasings preferred by different commanders. Page 7. The Eins Dictionary. Turing's innovation, cataloguing every possible encryption of the German word for one. Eins. Numbers appear constantly in military traffic: coordinates, timestamps, unit designations, ammunition counts. The Germans spell them out rather than using single digits, creating a 4-letter crib that appears across all message types. Page 12. Keine besonderen Ereignisse. Nothing to report. The phrase shows up in routine status updates, a bureaucratic requirement that becomes a cryptanalytic gift. The longer the crib, the more electrical pathways the bomb can test, the higher the probability of success. Hinsley checks the overnight intercepts. A transmission from 0512 hours, originating from grid square AJ37 in the North Atlantic. Probable U-boat weather report. Message length, 147 letters, consistent with standard meteorological format. He pulls out the short weather cipher codebook, captured from a German trawler 6 weeks ago. Temperature, pressure, wind, visibility, cloud cover. The data points are standardized. He writes out a proposed crib, Wettervoraussicht Weather Forecast Region 1. 28 letters, long enough to create robust bomb runs. Now comes the critical step, determining where in the ciphertext this plain text might appear. The Enigma's crucial vulnerability saves him hours of trial and error. A letter never encrypts to itself. Hinsley takes the ciphertext and his proposed crib, sliding them against each other position by position. At position 1, plain text W against ciphertext W. Impossible. Eliminated. Position 2. Plain text W against ciphertext V. Possible. He continues through the alphabet, marking each impossible alignment with a red line. By 0610 hours, 3 possible crib positions remain. He passes them to the Bombe menu designers, cryptanalysts who translate plaintext ciphertext relationships into electrical pathways. By 0645 hours, the first menu is ready. A runner carries it to the bomb outstation, where WRENS are already preparing the machine. Across Bletchley Park, similar hunts proceed simultaneously. Hut 6 focuses on German Army and Air Force traffic, where different cribs prevail. Spruchnummer, message number. An die Gruppe, to the group. Heil Hitler, the mandatory closing that appears in countless transmissions, a political requirement that becomes a cryptographic liability. The team has learned to think like German operators. After a bombing raid, they search for damage reports, knowing the phrases that will appear: Angriff, attack, Schaden, damage, Verluste, losses. Before a military operation, traffic surges with logistics messages containing predictable content: munition, Treibstoff, fuel. Bereitstellung, deployment. The most audacious crib source requires active deception. When Arctic convoys prepare to sail, Bletchley Park requests that RAF Bomber Command lay mines in specific German-controlled harbors. The locations are chosen carefully. Grid coordinates that don't contain German words, frequently abbreviated, ensuring the warning messages will use full spellings. The Kriegsmarine responds predictably, transmitting mine warnings first in a low-level harbor cipher, which Bletchley Park has already broken, and then repeating the same information verbatim over the Enigma encrypted U-boat network. The British call this gardening, planting mines to cultivate cribs. The German messages contain precise grid references, easily matched between the two transmissions. Hut 8 receives both versions, knows the plaintext exactly, and feeds perfect cribs to the bombs. By 0800 hours, 6 bomber runs are underway across 3 machines. The mechanical soldiers march through rotor configurations, testing hypotheses at 100 revolutions per minute. In Hut 8, Hinsley begins preparing tomorrow's crib predictions, always working one day ahead. The Germans will change their daily key at midnight. The hunt will begin again. But today, if the cribs are good and the sillies are present, Bletchley Park will read Germany's secrets. Weather reports and Wetterbericht, January 15, 1941. So 6:20 hours. Kriegsmarine Telegraph Station, Kiel, Germany. Funkgefreiter Werner Scholz transmits his 37th weather report of the new year. The procedure has become mechanical. Receive meteorological data from observation posts, encode it using the short weather cipher booklet, encrypt the result through the Enigma machine, transmit to U-boat command. The content varies minimally. Temperature gradients over the Baltic, atmospheric pressure systems, wind velocity measurements. The format never changes. He sets the rotors to the daily key distributed at midnight. Wheel order IV2V, ring settings specified in the monthly codebook. For the message key, he glances at the clock. 0621. He types WER, encrypts it twice, notes the indicator group in the message preamble. Then the weather data flows through. Wettervorhersage Nord Z, weather forecast North Sea. At Bletchley Park, the intercept arrives 12 minutes later. The wireless operators at Station X have been tracking German weather transmissions since 1939, noting their clockwork regularity. Morning reports at 0600, midday updates at 1200, evening summaries at 1800. The Germans need accurate meteorological data to plan naval operations, coordinate air missions, manage submarine patrols. The British need predictable cribs to break the daily Enigma key. In Hut 8, the morning crib team, expanded to include specialists in weather terminology and maritime operations, examines the intercept. Message length, 213 letters. Transmission origin, Kiel Station, serving Baltic Fleet operations. Timestamp, 0632 hours, consistent with morning weather protocol. Sean Wiley, a mathematics don from Oxford, leads the analysis. Standard format, he announces, pulling out reference materials. And they'll begin with Wetterbericht or Wettervorhersage, followed by regional designation, Nordsee, Atlantic, Canal. The team constructs the probable plaintext from decoded samples accumulated over months. Temperature, encoded as letters A through Z, representing specific ranges. Atmospheric pressure, similarly coded, following standardized meteorological conventions. Wind direction, 8 cardinal points, each with a letter designation. The short weather cipher reduces complex meteorological data into a compact 7-letter message, which the Enigma then encrypts. We know the first word with high confidence, Wiley continues, writing on the blackboard, Wettervorhersage. 16 letters, enough for a solid bomber run. The team aligns the proposed crib against the ciphertext, applying the self-encryption test. Positions eliminated. 1, 5, 9, 13, 28, 31. Possible positions remaining. 7, 18, 24. 3 menus generated 3 different assumptions about where the crib appears in the message. By 0715 hours, the first Bombe is wired and running. The machine in Hut 11, they've named it Agnes, begins testing rotor configurations for wheel order I3 Phi. The cryptanalysts don't know the wheel order. That's part of what the daily key specifies. So multiple machines run simultaneously, each testing a different combination of the 5 possible rotors. At 0732 hours, Agnes stops. The WREN operator, Sarah Baring, notes the rotor positions displayed on the drums. 172204. She transcribes the data, passes it to the checking station. Another WREN, Margaret Rock, sets up a 3-rotor Enigma replica using the proposed settings, types in the ciphertext. Gibberish emerges. The stop is a false positive. Agnes resumes its mechanical march. At 0749 hours, Agnes stops again. Positions 0915 to 26. The checking procedure repeats. This time, when Rock types the ciphertext into the test Enigma, German words appear in the lampboard, Wettervora Sagenordzi Temperatur. The crib is confirmed, but rotor positions alone don't provide the complete daily key. The plugboard settings remain unknown. 10 cables connecting pairs of letters, creating 150 trillion additional possibilities. Fortunately, the crib has provided more than rotor positions. By working through the electrical pathways implied by the known plaintext ciphertext relationships, the cryptanalysts can deduce several plugboard connections. Plaintext W encrypts to ciphertext K. The current flows through specific rotors, reflects, returns. If W and K are swapped in the plugboard, the electrical path changes. By testing the decryption against the full message, they isolate which letters must be paired. WK, ET, RB, VN, OJ. 5 of the 10 plugboard cables identified. The remaining 5 cables can be solved through pattern analysis and frequency distribution, or simply by testing combinations until the decrypted messages produce clear German text. By 0830 hours, the complete daily key is reconstructed. Every subsequent message transmitted by the Kriegsmarine on this network for the remainder of the day will be readable within minutes of intercept. The intelligence flows immediately to the Admiralty, to Coastal Command, to convoy routing stations. U-boat positions revealed, attack groups identified, supply routes calculated. The weather report that Obergefreiter Klaus transmitted so routinely has opened every secret his service possesses. And tomorrow morning at 0600 hours, the Germans will transmit another weather report, another predictable crib, another opportunity for Bletchley Park to break the unbreakable. The breakthrough cascade, March 9th, 1941, 1140 hours. Hut 8, Bletchley Park. The breakthrough doesn't announce itself with fanfare. It arrives as a stack of intercepts delivered by pneumatic tube, routine German naval traffic from the Bay of Biscay operations area. But Hugh Alexander, reviewing the indicator groups during his mid-morning shift, sees something that makes him reach for his telephone. Turing, Hut 8. Come now, he says simply, then hangs up. Turing arrives within 2 minutes, still wearing his bicycle clips. Alexander has spread 15 intercepts across the work table, all transmitted between 0430 and 0640 hours this morning, all from the same German station, identified by call sign and transmission characteristics as a supply coordination center in La Rochelle. Look at the indicators, Alexander says, his finger tracing down the list. KRLMNR, KRLPQS, KRLTUV, KRLABC. Turing sees it immediately. The first 3 letters are identical. KRL in every message. Not just today, Alexander replies, pulling out intercepts from the past week. 7 days of transmissions, 43 messages total. Every single indicator begins with KRL. They're witnessing a silly of remarkable consistency. Some German operator, probably working alone on night shifts at a remote station, has decided that choosing random message keys represents an unnecessary mental burden. He has settled on KRL, perhaps his initials, perhaps a girlfriend's name, perhaps simply the first three-letter combination he thought of on his first night of duty, and he has used it, transmission after transmission, for over a week. This is better than a crib, Turing says, his mind already working through implications. We know the plaintext message key. We know it's being encrypted at the initial rotor positions to produce the first three letters of the indicator. That gives us an exact relationship between plaintext and ciphertext. Alexander nods. And because it's been used across multiple days, we can compare how the same plaintext encrypts differently as the daily key changes. That tells us something about rotor movements, ring settings, plugboard variations. Within the hour, the entire HUT-8 cryptanalytic staff is mobilized. Joan Clarke constructs comparison charts showing how KRL encrypted differently across 7 days. Wiley calculates the electrical pathways implied by each encryption. Welchman designs Bombe menus that exploit the known plaintext. The first menu runs at 12:45 hours. The bomb, Victory, recently delivered from BTM and still being tested, processes the KRL silly for today's daily key. At 13:03 hours, 18 minutes into the run, Victory stops. The checking procedure confirms rotor positions solved. Plugboard deductions follow, extracted from the KRL sillies electrical implications. By 13:40 hours, the complete daily key is broken, but the team doesn't stop there. With today's key solved, they return to the previous 6 days of intercepts, messages they couldn't read when first captured. Using the KRL silly, they construct retrospective bomb runs, breaking each daily key in turn. By 1600 hours, they have decrypted 1 week of German supply coordination traffic, convoy schedules, cargo manifests, submarine refueling arrangements, coastal patrol routes. The intelligence cascades through British naval planning. Convoy routes are adjusted to avoid known U-boat patrol zones. RAF Coastal Command receives target coordinates for supply vessels. The Admiralty maps German naval dispositions with unprecedented accuracy. On March 16th, a week after the initial breakthrough, the KRL silly abruptly disappears. The La Rochelle operator either receives disciplinary correction, is replaced, or perhaps simply changes his habits. His indicators show greater randomness: MQZJKF, PVSTLX, HWRCBN. But the damage is done. 7 days of perfect clarity have revealed patterns in German operational planning, supply cycles, communication schedules, even the personalities and competencies of different commanders. More importantly, the KRL breakthrough validates the entire silly hunting methodology. If one operator made this mistake, others will too. The silly book expands, documenting every identified operator weakness across all German networks. The Bombe menus grow more sophisticated, designed to exploit not just cribs but sillies, not just predictable content but predictable laziness. In Wilhelmshaven, Obergefreiter Bergmann continues using his girlfriend's initials, CIL, as his mental default message key. In Kiel, Funkgefreiter Scholz continues transmitting weather reports at 0600 hours with perfect regularity. In Berlin, the German High Command remains confident that Enigma provides unbreakable security. And at Bletchley Park, the cryptanalysts have learned that the weakest point in any cipher system is not the mathematics or the machinery, but the exhausted human being operating it at 4 a.m. after a 12-hour shift. The hidden Victory, May 8, 1943, 2315 hours. Commander's Office, Bletchley Park. Commander Edward Travis, Operational Director of the Government Code and Cipher School, reviews the quarterly statistics in the quiet hours before midnight. The numbers tell a story that cannot be told, a victory that cannot be acknowledged, a war being won in silence. In the first quarter of 1943, Bletchley Park broke 84% of intercepted German Enigma traffic within 24 hours of capture. 2 years ago, that figure was 12%. The difference: industrialized crib exploitation, systematic cillie identification, and 49 operational bombs running continuously across multiple outstations. The human cost of German operator fatigue has become quantifiable. Hut 8 currently tracks 127 distinct operators, showing consistent cryptographic weaknesses. 63 use repetitive message keys, sillies, ranging from personal initials to keyboard patterns. 41 show time-based discipline degradation, maintaining protocol early in their shifts, but collapsing into predictability after hour 8. 23 use sequential alphabetical patterns, apparently believing that ABC, BCD, CDE represents sufficient randomness. The weather report cribs remain the most reliable entry point. German meteorological discipline never wavers. U-boats transmit at scheduled times, using standardized formats containing predictable German words. The short weather cipher system, intended to compress data efficiently, instead compresses the search space for British cryptanalysts. In April 1943, 71% of daily naval Enigma keys were solved using weather-based cribs. Travis turns to the intelligence impact assessments, classified documents that will remain sealed for decades. Atlantic convoy losses down 68% since systematic Enigma exploitation began. U-boat casualties up 214% as Coastal Command receives precise hunting coordinates. German operational planning in North Africa, Italy, the Eastern Front, readable within hours, sometimes within minutes. The price of this knowledge is eternal silence. The 11,000 personnel at Bletchley Park and its outstations have signed Official Secrets Act declarations that will bind them for life. The bombs cannot be photographed, discussed, or acknowledged. When Allied commanders use Enigma intelligence, codenamed Ultra, they must construct alternative explanations for how the information was obtained. Reconnaissance flights are flown over targets already identified by decrypts, creating plausible cover stories. Agents who don't exist are credited with intelligence gathered by cryptanalysts who officially don't exist. In his final report of the night, Travis notes a troubling development. German communications security has begun tightening in some networks. New procedures prohibit message key repetition. Training emphasizes true randomness. Some U-boat groups have switched to 4-rotor Enigma machines, exponentially increasing cryptanalytic difficulty. But the countermeasures come too late, implemented too slowly. The habits of thousands of operators, ingrained over years of operations, cannot be changed overnight. And Bletchley Park evolves faster than German security protocols. The Americans are now building their own bombs. Faster, more sophisticated, capable of attacking 4-rotor Enigma. The British have refined crib exploitation to an industrial science. Travis signs the daily briefing report, which will be couriered to Churchill's residence before dawn. The Prime Minister receives these updates with ritualistic attention, understanding that Bletchley Park provides his nation with a strategic advantage no army can match: the ability to read the enemy's mind. In Wilhelmshaven, Obergefreiter Bergmann, if he still lives, if he hasn't been transferred or promoted or killed in an Allied bombing raid, might be ending his night shift, transmitting one last message before dawn. Perhaps he still uses CIL as his message key, a small act of mental efficiency in a war that demands everything. Perhaps he has learned discipline. It no longer matters. The methodology for exploiting operator weakness has been perfected. Even if Bergmann reforms, somewhere in the vast apparatus of German military communications, another exhausted operator is making the same mistake. The real Enigma, the true cipher that needed breaking, was never the machine. It was the assumption that human beings could maintain perfect cryptographic discipline under the crushing monotony of total war. The Germans built a system that was theoretically unbreakable, then placed it in the hands of people who were tired, stressed, bored, and predictable. Bletchley Park didn't defeat the Enigma machine, they defeated the men who operated it. Travis closes the file, locks it in his safe, and walks out into the Buckinghamshire night. Across the compound, the bombs continue their mechanical calculations, searching for the patterns that human fallibility inevitably creates. The war will continue for 2 more years, but its outcome, unacknowledged, hidden beneath layers of official secrecy, has already been decided in this collection of wooden huts and temporary buildings. The codebreakers have cracked more than cipher systems. They have cracked the fundamental limitation of any security apparatus built on human discipline. And that crack, once opened, grows into a chasm through which the tide of history flows. One exhausted operator, repeating 3 letters because his shift has lasted too long. One predictable weather report, transmitted at the same time every morning. One small crack in the armor of the Third Reich's communication security. It was enough